Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and I'm here with my co-host, Gail Burke. And this is going to be the fourth in our series of discussions about what's the state of the city. And for a change, we're bringing in somebody who is not involved in the politics directly, but one of the leading citizens, Jim Modugno. Welcome, Jim.
Well, thank you, George and Gail. I appreciate you inviting me.
Hi, Jim.
Now, just for curiosity, you sent me an email talking about some of your past heritage, and you said your grandfather changed your pronunciation or your name to make it a hard D and a hard G. How do you pronounce it now?
Yes. So when I was growing up as a kid, we always said our name is Modugno. But in reality, what I found out when I was actually umpiring a baseball game down in Saugus, which has a large Italian community, when I introduced myself to the gentleman, the older gentleman at that time turned to me and said, "That's not your name." And I said, "Yes, it is." And he goes, "No, your name is Modugno."
Oh,
Interesting.
Right? So the D and the G's are silent or very soft, right?
yeah.
And so, that was something that was done, and part of it was for people to, in those days when they came to America, to assimilate into the culture, right? To make themselves less, I guess different might be a way of kind of looking at that. And so in about 1999, I decided I would change the way I pronounce my name.
So
I went back to what the Italian version of it was.
Do your children do that too, Jim?
No, they don't. They continue with the Haji, and my wife continues with the Haji, but I stay with that one. It also made it much easier in the business world to be able to say your name is Modugno, because when I say my name is Jim Modugno, somebody say, "Hey, Doug, what are you doing?" Right? Right? Because, and nobody could spell it to begin with anyway. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that was not uncommon.
Yeah.
And as the years went on, I learned more about what people did to fit in.
Yeah. So
Very
back to the city. As we started off the show, it's what's the state of the city? So what's your take on where do you think the city is? Where do you think it's going? Where do you think it should go?
Well, I look at it and I say to myself, we're definitely in transition. I look at it around the city and I see a lot of things that just aren't getting done. The roads in Beverly just continue to get worse year by year. And it just doesn't seem, when you look at the budget, that any significant amount of money has been allocated to the budget. I also joined, with your help, George, the Unified Beverly activity, so I could get a better understanding of what people were talking about in those meetings, because I'd seen a couple of the minutes of the meetings, and I wanted to understand what were we trying to do. And living in this community, you can't get by certain things. When I go out walking every morning, I'm out early, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. I always go up, by the time I'm done, I do a 5-mile loop and it brings me through downtown Beverly. And, I couldn't help but see the Black Lives Matter flag flying at the same level as the American flag. So, from that standpoint, I made some inquiries as to what we were doing with that. And then that's why I wanted to understand what are we having for this? What issues are we having in the community? What are people having? I know our populations of minorities aren't that high. Beverly's always had a little bit of a mix, but I just want to understand what people are talking about. And then you read in the paper about all these positions that are being hired. And I'm looking and saying, we got a city that's been challenged by the COVID-19. When I walk downtown Beverly, the number of empty storefronts, the businesses are no longer in them, have grown in every passing month. because of the COVID and the lack of being able to, for people to be able to go into those stores. And so I look at that and I say to myself, well, the revenue stream is definitely going to be cut down. Taxpayers are going to be pressured. The mayor announced that he was going to go full board on the real estate increase in property taxes. And at the same time, you know that the restaurant businesses downtown have been impacted, and therefore the city also loses a little bit of revenue in terms of the meals taxes and other things like that. For them to, and even for our state, a city to look the state to be able to provide us with lots of extra money, I don't think that's going to come their way either, because I think a lot of things have been impacted. And yet, you know, I'm looking and I'm hearing that we're adding 2 different, correct me if I get them wrong, are they called EDI positions?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we have one evidently going for the school department. We have another one that's the mayor is thinking about adding in the city side of the budget. My understanding is the job description is going to be $150,000. The person's going to report to the, and I want to thank Mike though for asking people in the community to give him feedback on it, which some of the things I'll mention, I actually gave him feedback on. And so when you think about it, 150 here, 111 on the school side, you add those together, throw the bennies in there, and all of a sudden you're looking at some pretty substantial amount of money that you're shelling out for those positions. And when I look at those things, the things I shared with the mayor sending it back to him was basically I wanted to share with him the fact that I think looking into these things and you know, making sure that everybody is conducting business appropriately in the community, that we don't have racial issues and other things, I think it's all good. And I think the city really needs to just make sure that we're doing everything possible. But I'm concerned when you're adding all these positions in a time when things are down. And when I've read the accounts of the last 2 meetings, George and Gail, that the people had, and now I'll be available for the 3rd one, and I'll be able to listen myself firsthand, so I'll have it. It didn't seem like there was any specific, how would you say, actionable commentary that was actually generated. And so when I look at this, and when I read the job description that Mike had shared with us, I couldn't help but think that, you know, I come out of the business world, and in the business world, one of the things that you can count on is the fact that companies are all over the fact that there are certain things you just have to have that you need to run your business with. Everybody's trained in conflict resolution. We have to take that training every single year. We had to take ethics of business every single year. We had to take harassment training, which includes a lot of the details that are in the EDI, right? We also had to take standard of conduct or code of conduct, right? And you had to read it and sign off on it. And this training was always done. We had hiring and interviewing techniques. And how do you handle minorities, and how you handle, you know, how do you handle it during the job processes? So when I look at all these things, I say to myself, I thought we had an HR department in the city of Beverly. So I did some research, and we do have an HR department. So, and then I tried to find out, do we have an HR department on the school side? To be honest with you, I wasn't able to successfully find out whether or not we did. It's not listed on their site as having that position. Now, they probably do. Maybe they have it listed somewhere else that I can't find it, and so forth. And that would be an issue I would have. If we have 2 HR departments, that would be wrong. But I think if you're going to hire somebody, these are the type of jobs that are usually in the business world that are usually managed by the HR department. They're the people who you know, roll out the training and other things like that. Oftentimes, George, in these type of things, and you worked in the business world for a long time, and Gail, I'm sure you get some knowledge on this too, is that you oftentimes will you don't do all the training yourself. You don't, a lot of times, especially today, you can buy packages, training packages that you can have, and you can put them on your website, and people can train, and you can track your training on those type of issues. So
I think one of the points that you're bringing up that needs to be emphasized is that several years back, the school department was having problems keeping up with their maintenance. And it was consolidated under Mike Collins as the engineering department, public works department. And I think what you're implying is that maybe we should have some more concise thinking about it. We have an HR department. Maybe you need to expand it a little bit, but not that much. And I think you're making the point that any manager at any level should have most of the responsibility to make sure that these things don't happen. And an outside package would support this, and we don't need to hire 2 more people. And then we get to the other issue you brought up. We're hiring somebody to worry about the green gas. It's a
Yes,
I wanted to just jump in here for a minute, because the position that you're talking about, is this the one that's going to be anonymously funded by the Monarch Group? Is that the position you're talking about?
That's one of them, yeah.
Yeah, and I
It's
was
the
reading,
green gas job.
right, I was
I got a
reading a
fancy
little bit
name.
about it, and it said that the first year, it'll be funded 80%. And then I think it's after three or 4 years, the funding drops down to 20%. So that goes on the backs of the taxpayers. And is there a need for this, when you're talking about HR and that sort of thing, is there really a need for this position, or are they just creating a need for it?
well, it's great questions, Gail. I mean, when I heard about this, I kind of looked into it, and you're right about the funding type of thing. What the Monarch Group, which appears to be located in Southern California with a branch called Monarch Realty, located in Canton and also in Mansfield. I looked at their website and tried to understand, because usually if somebody's giving you $100,000 for that position on day one, and we still have to pay the bennies for that person.
That's right.
Right, and that's about a 30% on average, right? Could be off a few percentage points, but ballparking, I think we can talk like that. And then the question you say, I looked at, usually companies who are providing this money usually comes out of a foundation. I could not find their foundation.
I couldn't either, Jim, and I looked for it.
Right. And so when you can't find a foundation from somebody, then you start asking the question of, okay, what do they do? Well, they're realtors, developers, right? And so, I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong here. I'm just saying we need to just be very, very careful on what we do. And I'm sure Mike will have more information. He'll explain to everybody what's going on and how it's going to be, and what tasks and what jobs are they going to be creating. I look around the community, and I think everybody's, there's nothing wrong with clean air, right? Clean earth, water, nothing wrong with that. I think we all believe in that. I'm sure we all recycle. I recycle. I have solar panels on my house, so I try to do my part for it. Is there more the city could do? Sure, maybe there's things they could do. The question you have in these type of adventures is, how much is this going to cost the taxpayers of the Beverly, and what is the benefit? Every business decision, cities have to be run like businesses, not like pet projects, right? And so, I think if we can do more green, that's super, but there needs to be a payback. We need to be able to get our money back. So this position at $100,000, all right, they pay for it maybe the first year without the benefit, and then it decreases. If you're not getting a return on that money, you shouldn't be doing it.
That's right. You should be repaving the streets of Beverly, filling in
Well,
the
there are
potholes
things that
all
have
of that.
to be done today, and I think the
Exactly.
streets are one of them. I mean, I got friends who moan and groan all the time about having to do front end alignments every year.
Exactly.
Now, I don't drive as much as they do around Beverly, but it's true. When I walk, the sidewalks are horrible, the streets are horrible, and I think we have like and I could be wrong with the numbers. I think it's 120 miles worth of roads or something like that. If we're only doing 2 to 3 miles a year, in Massachusetts and Northeast, the roads don't have a shelf life like they might in Southern California or they might have in Texas. We're definitely never going to catch up, and we're only going to get worse. So yeah, I'm concerned about those type of things, and I'm concerned about adding all these, additional money onto the budget and everything in positions.
Well, especially now with so many people being out of work.
Yeah, I mean, and adding positions, I think are, what are the problems? Think about what problem we're trying to solve with the EDIs. I didn't read or hear that there was anything specific. And when I read some of the commentaries that people have, I'm really concerned that, I support the Beverly Police Department, the men and women of Beverly. I think they get up every day and they go and they do a really fantastic job. They put their lives on the line every day for us. And I'm just afraid in America we're villainizing the police department for problems that are not related to them in our society.
Exactly.
So, and defunding them, any talks of defunding them, I think I'll tell you, it's just madness to hear that being referred to as defunding police departments.
Well, it is madness because at the same time, they're letting many convicted felons out of prison, supposedly because of the coronavirus. Two right here in the North Shore were let out. 2 murderers.
Really?
Oh yeah, this was in April that 2 convicted murderers from the North Shore were among the 200 inmates released by the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. Richard Crotty and Barbara Goucher. And they were both let out of prison. And one of them was a former police officer, actually. But the other one was a woman who murdered another woman in Gloucester.
Oh, I think I heard about that one.
Yep, and they were let out of prison. So at the same time you're talking about getting rid of the police, even though the defunders say, oh, it's not getting rid of the police. In many areas, it means getting rid of the police. What in heaven's name would a city do without a police department?
You look at society, it's law and order. If you don't have law and order in your society crumbles. Now, I think it's not a bad idea that, the police chief and others are re-looking at their policies and procedures. That's just common that you do in business on any kind of aspect, is revisiting to make sure that what you have is appropriate, that what you're doing still works and it is the right way to approach it. And I think it needs to be done with a great deal of respect. And let's not make the men and women of the Beverly Police Department or any police department around here as being the bad guys. They're not the bad guys. They're not.
You made a couple of comments the other day about the Beverly Police. The police chief, I think you were quoting.
Yeah.
He was asking people to give him specifics. And I don't remember the exact quote that you used, George, but I know that you had been talking to him.
Yeah, we had the chief on to discuss this whole issue at one time. And what you're talking about is the last meeting of this committee on what's going on in the city. And he was a member of the panel. And when they started bringing up, well, we've got problems in the city. And he said, well, give me the specifics and I'll investigate them. And nobody said anything specifically. Now, there's a letter floating around that was approved by the board Monday night, the city council Monday night, written by Scott Hausman, that's talking about some of these issues. And he's talking about, well, I've gotten woke because people have pointed out to me some things. I wish somebody would start to share some of this so that, yeah, if there's a problem, I'd like to know about it. And I think that
Absolutely.
that if I know about it, I can then react a little more intelligently. But right now, there's no issue that I can see, and we're hiring two people to solve non-problems.
Yeah. Well, it's like the racism thing. We did a show the other day with Julie Flowers, and she was talking about racism. And we talked back and forth. And I said, well, I lived in Beverly for 13 years, and I never saw any indication of racism. So is the racism being blown up because of something one person may have said, like in the schools? I mean, the superintendent had made a big deal about some kind of racism in the schools because one student had said something, but she didn't elaborate on it. So was it something that, you know how kids are? They make comments all the time, and somebody took offense at it. So there was a big deal about that. And I fear that the same thing is happening, maybe not so much in Beverly, but in other communities, and it's being blown out of proportion. And we make a big deal out of it and say that, okay, that means there's systemic racism. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't believe it exists. At least not in this area. It may exist elsewhere where there are more of a minority group than is here in Beverly or in other communities. But I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I was disappointed when the mayor declared in sometime in August that racism is a public health emergency in Beverly.
I don't get that.
And I just don't understand it, and I would need him to help me understand what that is. I think that's important. I think he needs to be able to clarify what that is. I think him holding those meetings, maybe he's trying to get at what he's thinking. I don't think America's a racist country. I don't think it has systemic racism in it. Do I think there are people of that may be racist? I think you will find some people somewhere in America that have those things.
Of course.
And quite frankly, racism isn't a one-way street.
I agree.
Well, the other point you started off with, I got you into it, asking about the pronunciation of your name. There has been quite a bit of concern throughout history of how the minorities are treated when the immigrants come to this country. And it's not a problem that is unique to any particular group. Everybody got it. And I've used this before that when I was growing up in Providence, it was the transition between the Irish and the Italians is who was running the state and who was running the city. And all the jokes used to be either Irish jokes or Italian jokes. And I moved to Chicago, and all the same jokes were now Polish jokes. And you mentioned in one of the emails we traded the last couple of days, whatever happened to that thing we learned as a kid, sticks and stones will break my bones and names will never hurt me. And there was a song by Ella Fitzgerald years and years ago of it ain't what you say, it's the way how you do it. And there's also a variation on that. It ain't what you say, it's the way how you say it. And got into a discussion with a gentleman of African heritage, and we're talking about the same issue, and he drops the paddy wagon on me. Oh, well, I'm second generation Irish. And I didn't realize it, but paddy wagon is a racial slur. And it goes along with the Black Mariah and the Murphy bar too. But they just reflect a time when most of the police attention was in the Irish low rent district. And it comes down to the way that he said it. If he was saying it as an insult, I would have got very incensed. But he's just dropping it as common parts of the language. And just over my head, I don't worry about that. And I think this is the problem we're getting into, that people are taking too many of these issues and trying to make something out of them when it's nothing. Brush it off your shoulder. Don't worry about it. Move on to the real problems. And that's my concern with these positions that are being added. We're virtue signaling, trying to make ourselves look politically correct. And as you point out, the roads, real issue.
That has gotten us into so much trouble. It's trying to be politically correct. And look where we are.
Yeah. And the building of downtown Rantoul Street and now maybe Cabot Street, these are concerns. The TOD about more build out around the railroad stations. I mean, these are real issues that need to be discussed and worked on. And we're wasting time on some of these other issues for no apparent reason until, as you pointed out earlier, Jim, the mayor and or somebody comes up and says, hey, this is the problem we had. And this really happened here in Beverly. Then we said, yeah, we got to fix that. But until then,
don't look for
I don't
trouble.
feel like fixing Chicago's problems.
You know, I was encouraged by the fact that the police chief was more than willing to review all his statistics, review his procedures and his policies and everything else. So I think talk is always good. I also know, and I took offense at one of the minutes of the meeting too, and not much of offense, but I noted that, you know, when you want to have conversations with people, you cannot, you have to start off your conversations with people by coming to some common ground as to some commonality. You cannot intimidate your people by making people uncomfortable. People, I was in procurement for many, many years. I negotiated contracts for over 30 years. And in negotiating contracts, what you do is you have to come and you make people comfortable so you can have conversations of give and take. And give and take is how things are done. Intimidating people, when people say I made somebody uncomfortable and I like that, you know what I say to that? I say that's a form of intimidation and bullying. And I've never bought into bullying or intimidating anybody. You just can't do it that way. You get along with people because you come to common ground as to what you have in common. If you have things that just don't match up, you work on them, right? And that's how you solve problems. You concentrate on all the things you have in common. And everybody in America has something in common, regardless of what the color of their skin is, regardless what their orientation is or their ethnic background. They are human beings, right? And we should be able to say with confidence that all lives matter. And of course, a Black life matters as much as every other person's life. And that's where we need to be. That's not that hard to do. And I think all the people I know, right? I know lots of people. I've worked and hired people of all nationalities. I've had people who worked for me that were from South Korea, from Singapore. I've hired a number of Afro-Americans. A man and a woman have worked for me for many, many years. I hire them for the talent, for their skills and what they brought to the party. And they delivered day after day after day. And of course, in the workplace, I didn't see much activity that would be racist in nature because we're running a business. It's not tolerated. And if an issue came up of anything, it was addressed immediately. It was not tolerated. That's where the training comes in with companies. If Beverly's not doing this type of training that I've mentioned, then we're falling short. A lot of the training that I mentioned is federally mandated for people
I think
to have.
what you're getting to, Jim, is there ought to be some motivation put on the upper management that, hey, this is part of your job. It's
Absolutely.
not something you shuffle off to HR or we hire some new guru to come in and sort it out. And I think that one of the points you're making about being uncomfortable, you don't start off putting people on a guilt trip as soon as you start the conversation. And I think that's where one of the shortfalls of this whole exercise is. And the other shortfall of this whole exercise, we're running out of time. We've been having too much fun this past half hour. So I want to thank you very much for joining us. And obviously there's more to be said, and would like to invite you to come back, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
It'd be my pleasure. And I thank you for
Ladies-
inviting me.
Jim, it was great to see you again.
Good to see you, Gail.
Keep
Always
up
good to see
good
you.
work.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And as we said, we'll do more of these, so stay tuned.